So do me a favor. Can you explain to us what is define divine feminine and divine masculine, please?
Sure. So the way I think about it, I will say that the words masculine and feminine have a lot of baggage, right? They have a lot of baggage. So let's kind of remove that baggage, but it's the words that we're left with when we think of like those capacities that we think of as being more masculine versus those capacities we think as being more feminine. Um, in all the traditions that you could go back to, there's always kind of a dichotomy of two forces or two archetypes in the universe, oftentimes related to the creation myths of that culture. And they're often associated to a masculine force of order and a feminine force of energy or expression. So the culture that I like to like borrow from the most because of the imagery is the Shiva Shakti dichotomy. So Shiva is typically pictured sitting on like a lotus leaf in the middle of a perfectly still lake, and just in perfect presence, but nothing's going on. It's just stillness. It's just like order, right? And then Shakti, his divine consort, is his partner, and she's always depicted wildly dancing, and she has multiple manifestations, but including chaotic manifestations and destructive manifestations. But through the interplay of the two, you get the creation, and those aspects are in every human being, and how we relate to them is very important in terms of how we relate to them and embrace them in ourselves, whether we be men or women. Both that divine masculine uh, idea of order and logic and unflappability, and that the divine feminine capacity for expression, for compassion, for intuition. Those two together are fundamental to our nature. And oftentimes, the reason I use them and talk about them and think about them is because when we sort of retract away from one or the other of those, divine aspects, we get into trouble. So, for example, if we retract away from the feminine aspect, that intuitive, caring, kind, expressive sort of capacity that we have, we drop into something that society's called the toxic masculine. We're controlling, violent, authoritarian, cruel, right? And similarly, when we retract away from the masculine aspects of logic, unflappability, centered sense of self, ability to go out into the world, right? When we retract against those capacities, we become sort of dysregulated. We become, you have an unarticulated sense of self, chaotic, not able to do for ourselves. In the olden days, meaning not that old, but the beginning of the last century, they would call that, they had a diagnosis for that, was called hysteria. It was diagnosed 99% in women, but it was this kind of like lost ability to do for oneself, a victim mentality. So these are really important to kind of like understand these capacities that we have as humans, and kind of like and understand where we are in this on those timelines, and try and embrace the more positive aspects of those two dichotomies that we could have.
I remember hearing about those two, the feminine and masculine energies, as they would say, early on. As I shared with you, I have the religious background when I was growing up and in my teens and my early 20s. But it was spoken of in a very positive light, right? It highlighted very positive attributes. The darker side, or the toxic side, or the unflattering side, as a lot of people would describe it, that was something that people were aware of, but we would say, hey, be aware of this because you can mean well, but it can lead you down this path. But these are some of the tools that we could equip you with to prevent you from going over, to quote my Star Wars fans out there, the dark side, right?
God, I'm one of those guys.
You're one of those, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
the Sith Lords were always there, right? But now, at least from what I view online and when I do research, it seems at the forefront is the more toxic side, the misogynistic, the misandry, right? And then we don't necessarily hear as much, at least on the surface, about the more positive sides. Why do you think people today, at least on the surface, are struggling with the more positive sides of masculinity and femininity?
That's a great question, one that I haven't been asked before. But my first guess is with regards, well, first guess is the algorithm. Negative information is boosted, and people are also more attracted to negative stories more than positive stories. And then fundamentally in society, that negative aspect of the feminine, taking away the positive of the feminine, leads to what we call the toxic masculine. So when you're not intuitive, rather than being intuitive, you're authoritarian. Rather than being flexible, you're controlling. Those negative aspects, we're just not. When people retract away from their feminine, the part of them that's feminine, they become this toxic masculine sort of archetype. Those are the people that are causing the problems in society. So they're the people that fill our prisons. They're the people who are causing crime. They're people who, domestic violence you talked about before, because they can't find that capacity for kindness, generosity, expression in their own hearts. And so when they retract away from that, they cause the problems. We don't talk so much in society and social media about retracting away from the masculine and being incapable. I guess we do in self-help circles. We try and teach responsibility and those things that are typically masculine, rather than the hysterical sort of archetype, the wounded feminine sort of archetype, which is what it's called. So that's what I would guess. We're concentrating on helping people, so that's the noise, and then we're also paying attention to those parts of self that, when they're in their less positive manifestation, it's kind of like, I want to fix that. But we often don't talk about, and it's diluted the words, and that's why I don't like it's to use. I mean, I have to use it because those are the words we have. But when we think about masculinity and then people label it as toxic, always thinking about it as toxic, it's problematic. It becomes problematic because then people start thinking of men as toxic or as women as incapable, which are both untrue fundamentally.
And I think that's where the danger is, because I've always believed that it's a minority of people, like it's a smaller group of people, but they're so loud
Mm-hmm.
about their problems, right? It's like the person on the street corner who's yelling, help me, give me this, give me that, right? Like it starts to drown out the conversations amongst everyone else. What do you then think we can do to help with a better image as men when it comes to femininity, and maybe for the women out there when it comes to masculinity?
Well, first of all, is to kind of understand that these two things are in us. These two kind of templates, they're in us just like they're in all parts of the world, right? So understand these things and try and slow down and look to ourselves and see how we are reacting to situations. I mean, kind of moving it beyond the masculine, feminine stuff, and just like we can, whenever we're feeling like reactive in the world, if we slow down and think about what's my intention here, like where do I want to go, and be a little more mindful about our actions, that and what am I feeling, what am I kind of thinking, rather than just reacting to an environmental stimulus, for example, that will bring us a long way towards going to our natural state, which is the divine state, right? It's the natural state of a human being, is to be kind, loving, to want to go out and do better in the world for themselves, for the families, for everybody. So I think a lot of people are so spun out in their minds and and disconnected from their hearts that they have trouble accessing these divine aspects of self. Their true self. Their most pure self. I guess you would want to maybe to use kind of loaded language. So I think slowing down is the number one thing people can do, and paying
What do you
attention to themselves. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what then do you think are some of the obstacles that people face when it comes to reaching that divine state and coming back to their true selves?
Uh, the ego, basically, the idea that this self that we've constructed over in your case almost 40 years, in my case 50 years, that we've constructed, tends to define us, and we build up walls which are consists of beliefs about how the world works. For example, like, nothing ever goes right for me. That's a belief. That's not true. If you examine that belief deeply, you can challenge someone with that belief and 30 seconds and they can name several things that have gone right for them in the last 24 hours, right? But it's a belief that's causing them to look at the world through that lens of nothing ever goes right for me. Therefore, I'm a victim. I'm not responsible, for example. Or the world is an ugly place. That could be another belief, for example. So if the world's an ugly place, you're going to see everything as an ugly situation, and you're going to react to it as if it's an ugly, toxic situation. So I think that buildup of beliefs that are based usually in childhood traumas that developed as a protective response to those traumas that we've in trying to figure out and make sense of the world, those color our perception and they become our current reality, and we react to the world based on that egoic sort of place. And when we can get beyond that and challenge those beliefs, first identify and then challenge those beliefs, then we can get closer and closer to developing and creating a new set of beliefs that are actually more in alignment both with ourselves and our deepest self and who we want to be in the world, and will bring us more peace and prosperity, which is what I think everybody wants, everybody's looking for.
I had a former friend who experienced what you're describing, and he had such a bad case of limiting beliefs where
Mm-hmm.
he always saw himself as the victim. It could have been
Mm-hmm.
anything. As soon as he woke up, Michael, I woke up late. Oh my God, the world did this to me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? In,
Absolutely.
right? Instead of, well, you stayed up until like 4 o'clock the night before. Like maybe
Mm-hmm.
that contributed to you
I think
staying up
so.
late. Right? I think so, just a little bit, right? But it became comfortable for him. So what he started to do, and one of the reasons why we're former friends now, is because he started to blame his friends for his issues. You guys are doing because of your success, Michael, is taking away from my success because you and I can't be successful at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have a healthy relationship with your girlfriend, boyfriend, whoever, it's preventing me from having healthy relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I bring this up is I love having this type of conversation because I like asking from a different perspective. Because for me, I was so close to the situation. And to be honest, it became a little annoying being blamed for someone else's problems.
Mm-hmm.
But since you're detached because you just met me, you don't know him, why do you think people get caught up in limiting beliefs to the point where it becomes comfortable and now they're trying to look and find a new oppressor almost every day?
Well, in the case of your friend, it's obviously protected for him because it's protected for him because if he can blame others, he doesn't have to blame himself. It's comfortable. I'm not a bad person. It's because the world is bad. So it serves that protective function. And it also allows him to continue to be up at 4 in the morning without taking responsibility for himself or doing the daily discipline of whatever it is he needs to move forward in the world. It gives him that out and makes him feel comfortable because I can blame everybody for my woes, right? Therefore, I am still a good person. It's just that the world is bad. And it becomes a self fulfilling prophecy. So he can continue to do things and interpret it through the lens of lack of response of the world being a bad place, that he's a victim, that his friends are out to get him, or the cause of his suffering, and therefore he's going to see it that way and continue to manifest behaviors that fit that paradigm. And he's also going to look for any little scrap of evidence that supports his belief. And until he can get beyond that and recognize that it's him, it's him that is the cause of his woes. And one exercise that is really cool, which you may have heard of, is you can take it. Anybody can do this, right? And you can just do this in 5 minutes. Is you write down something that you feel you had no control over, right? And how it impacted your life. And you write it down from that victim state. And then after you've done that, you flip it around and say, okay, now I'm going to write this story. I'm going to force myself to write this story based in reality where I could have made a choice along the way, or a series of choices along the way, where I wouldn't have ended up in that situation. And in every case, Sometimes it's early in before things unfold, or sometimes it's later, or there's many times that one could have pulled the plug. But you'll see, like, oh, I was responsible for that situation. There was many choices, many paths along the way where I could have chosen differently and wouldn't have ended up in the same situation that I'm now blaming the world for. But fundamentally, that's super empowering once someone can do that, and look at their past life and recognize, oh, I was the cause. Now, I may have not known, I could lack of knowledge, or whatever those things are, but it gives you an opportunity now to get that knowledge, to choose differently, to be more self-aware, to not stay up till 4 in the morning or whatnot. And it's very important to feel responsible, to have some sense of responsibility. We call it locus of control in your own life. It's really important for mental health, and it's also important for functioning well in the world. Does that answer the question?
It does, and it gives me a perspective to understand that sometimes you want to help this person, but they have to help themselves first. It's like when someone is talking about like addiction, or
Mm-hmm.
those who are in it. Sometimes they have to hit rock bottom before they can start to climb back up. And I know we have the best of intentions sometimes to want to help and quote unquote save.
Mm-hmm.
But what I've recently, maybe over the past like year or so, learned is that when you try to bring someone out of a situation, we need to take a moment and ask ourselves, does this person actually want to be saved? Or is it that we want to save that person because we think that they need to be saved? Because if I was in that situation, I would say, Michael, come on, help me out. But there's some people out there that are like, whoa, 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 Michael, I'm okay. You see this mess behind me? It's great. It's
Mm-hmm.
comfortable. It's all right. To your point, right? It's not me, it's everything else. And one thing you mentioned also was you mentioned childhood experiences. How much of an impact does our childhood have on how we view the world as adults, whether it's limiting beliefs or in general?
I mean, I don't think there's anything that is more critical to developing and creating those limiting beliefs. Uh, it's all childhood, adolescence. We've already formed these beliefs. We've already formed this understanding and this cause and effect sort of understanding of the world by the time we're in our late teens. I mean, and then it just becomes a matter of like going into the world and looking for confirming evidence, and um, because we're acting based on these beliefs, most of which we're not even consciously aware of. They're operating in the background, but we take them as the gospel truth. We take them almost by faith, that this is how the world is, and thus I'm interfacing with the world with the assumption that these truths are they're self-evident, right? And those truths, those beliefs that arise from you know adaptive sort of processes through childhood, they're very hard to steer clear of. They're very hard to see. And it's only through seeing and becoming self-aware and recognizing them that you can change them. You can't change anything you're not aware of, right? You just can't. Um, so that's the first thing. The other thing that I wanted to respond to with your with what you were saying about wanting to help other people, which is I think a natural response. You see someone screwing up their situation and they're not taking responsibility for themselves. They're staying up till 4 in the morning. Um, it has never worked to tell somebody what their problem is, but what if I the approach, and it's a very subtle approach, is to just ask them questions. They need to get there. They need to answer those questions for themselves. They need to get to, oh, what were you doing last night? I was up till 4 in the morning. Oh, okay. So were you tired this morning? Kind of, there's no judgment there. It's just you kind of leading them, oh, and then through that path, were you tired this morning? Oh, it must have been really hard to get up, huh? And not telling them, that's opposed to like, if you had gone to bed earlier, which is what I do to my kids sometimes, go to bed earlier, right? You're tired in the morning because of this or that. That never works. But through asking him questions on my better days, he gets, I need to, Papa, I need to get on a better sleep schedule. But it's only through the person answering the questions for themselves rather than being told. that they're going to get some change, because they need to be aware of their situation. And just telling them, it's like bouncing off a wall. Whatever you tell them is like, oh no, that this doesn't work or apply for me. So a little technique.
Yeah, yeah, because I think that's going to be helpful to a lot of people because from a friendship aspect, that's pretty good because then you're helping, but you're helping in a not an overbearing way, right? Because sometimes you want to say, okay, I can fix you. Now, what if you're in a relationship, a romantic relationship with someone, and your partner is struggling through that? How would we try to assist them come out of maybe some of these unsuccessful behaviors that they're experiencing?
Well, I mean, it's kind of the same way. First of all, you have to, I mean, relationships become much more complicated, right? Because a lot more, there's a lot more there in terms of the previous patterning between any two people that becomes something that needs to be unraveled uh, and sorted through, because it's oftentimes not, like, let's just take an example of somebody who's got a partner who's, you know, maybe drinking too much, for example. It's not just that they're drinking too much, but they're usually the partnership, the relationship is a constellation of forces that together are working to cause the behavior in one person. It's not just the one person that can be fixed. It is the entire container of the relationship and how the two people are interacting with one another. If the person doesn't feel safe, for example, and is using alcohol to kind of, or is bored in the relationship, or is escaping for some reason, it's it's not just them in that. It's kind of an it's kind of it's kind of like an infinity symbol. It's these two, things that are working. It's two forces, two people that are working together to create the behavior. So once you get into a relationship and you're talking about trying to fix a relationship or a partner, we need to look at the relationship from the from kind of externally, bring it out one level of observation, rather than just trying to fix your partner. Fixing your partner is not recognizing and putting it even in that framework. I need to fix my partner is not recognizing what do I contribute to the situation as a whole, because there's more factors. It's more complicated than just somebody who's not getting up on time or whatever, for whatever, if you're looking at it in that lens. Does that make any sense to you? Does that resonate?
It does, because the reason why I asked that question and your explanation makes sense to me is that there was a conversation I had with someone, and she was her and her husband. They're going through a rough patch, and she wanted to make things work. He wanted to make things work, but they're doing it separately, like a lot of probably couples do during that time, right? When there's
Yep.
conflict, you want to work on yourself and then come together, then work as a unit. But what was happening is that while he was doing the work and she was doing the work, she was still struggling to the point where she started to cheat and things like that. But on his side, he began to realize the more work he did on himself, the farther he started to drift from her, because you started to see he was being successful working on himself and she was kind of spinning her wheels, so to speak, right? And it unintentionally created distance between the two. Like any dynamic, right? You have one person who's turning their life around and the other person is driving their life into the ground, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So, and that's why I asked that, because it's kind of, at least from my point of view, interesting is the people that I work with is usually on a one-on-one basis when it comes to couples. I don't work on couples together, but I've always had that in my mind. I'm like, what if this other person is over there working and their progress is faster than their partner, and now they begin to resent their partner because they're not able to keep up when it comes to um turning their relationship around. What are your thoughts?
Well, there's a lot of I think there's a lot of things that I have a lot of thoughts about that. So I don't I think once we become comparative in terms of looking at our partner as a competitor, oh, he or she is doing more work, and and we're starting to look, anytime you're looking at your partner as a competitively, already a problem. I mean, that is just straight up fundamentally an issue. Um, the other, because you're not in competition with one another. If you're truly in a relationship, you are a team. And the way I like to think about it is, so this example that you're given, you have the partner A, partner B, and there's a third element in the room, which is the third element is the relationship. So it's like three things together. So partner A is doing their work in isolation on themselves only, and partner B is doing their work in isolation, and they're not communicating to that third element, which is the relationship, on a daily or basis. Then they're just, two ships going off in their own random directions, and the chance that they're actually headed in the same direction is low. So a quote, or actually an idea that I read that really resonates about long-term partnership was actually from Nietzsche, that I took from a book, or that I read in a book called The Middle Passage, which is a really, really powerful book. It's a Jungian psychology book about the second half of life. It talks about marriage or long-term relationships being really the longest conversation that you're going to have. And it talks about the fact that what you want is both people to be able to, both members of the relationship to be able to continue to grow and continue to communicate. If one partner isn't growing, for example, there's nothing more. You already know who they are stuck at, and if the other partner is the same thing, if they're not growing, it's they're stuck. So if one partner's growing and the other one's not, you have this kind of dichotomy, but the conversation gets boring. But if both partners are working on themselves and that third component that I was talking about, which is the relationship, and they're in continued conversation, learning who is this new person that I'm with, and it becomes exciting and interesting and exploratory, and it keeps one from automatizing the relationship. It allows one to see their partner with fresh eyes every day because their partner is growing. But in the example I heard, I'm taking it that these people will kind of like separate themselves out to work on themselves, and that's basically setting two ships in random directions wherever each partner kind of thinks they are. And the idea that they're going to come together at the end is really folly, because you don't know what direction those ships are. I have personal experience with this, and anyway, that's my thoughts on that.
I will agree. It's like you have a ship, to use your analogy, right? And you have two captains. One
Mm-hmm.
wants to go left, one wants to go right. So since there's no compromise and there's no middle ground, you're like, you know what, Michael, let me go get my other ship.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Right? And now we know the final destination, right? Like the final destination is peace, is happiness. It's let's get
Mm-hmm.
back together. But because we are navigating two different ships, the woman may get there a little bit faster, right? She may be further ahead, but the man may be going at it at a speed that he can last the entire journey, right? But because they're not communicating with each other, someone might go left and then go a little bit right, and he might go straight and he might fall back. So there isn't the communication. Now you can both agree that we want to save this, but if
Mm-hmm.
you're not saving it together,
Yeah.
then the question then is, to your point, right? Um, the journey itself is what makes the destination worthwhile, right? If you don't know how you're getting there, or if you don't know what this person has put into it, to your point, right? Like if it becomes a competition, then you're looking at this person as, if they succeed, does that mean I'm not? Because sometimes in competition, you can't have two winners.
Right. Well, the winner should be the relationship, right? Like
Absolutely.
if everybody's improving themselves and everybody's communicating and getting, learning more from their partner, and their partner's learning from them, and they're supporting each other, and the boats don't even have to be going in exactly the same direction. You can have different interests, you can have this and that and the other thing, but the idea is to come back together and relate to one another, uh, with whatever has arisen through the day. For example, like this happened, that happened, I'm working on this, I realize this about myself, oh, that's interesting. Those kinds of conversations, if they're not being had, you're going to be, those conversations not being had, you're going to lose radio contact between the boats, right? And if you're in competition, you're somebody's, the two boats are trying to get somewhere, faster than the other, that's also a shit show. I mean, it's just like, are we going to, are we, are we are we having these life journeys together? But it doesn't mean that the life journey is going to be the same. We're fundamentally different men and women, right? So what we're learning from and how we relate to one another is going to be different. So, and where we're going and what brings us joy, there's differences. What satisfies us in relationship is different. So through communication, and communication is kind of like, well, what does that mean? I mean deep communication, so that you can see each other freshly every day. And so you're learning, your partner remains interesting to you because there's things that you remain interesting to them. And people feel the ability to express themselves and be and learn about themselves and connect with themselves as they grow together, but not in the same way. I think that's also kind of folly, that we have to be doing the same thing, because no, I don't expect my partner to do the same thing I do. She's interested in a whole bunch of other things that I'm not interested in, but I love to hear about it, and she loves to hear about what I'm doing on a day to day basis. So that's where I think the magic happens.
What do you think is the cause of people thinking that they have to be so closely tied together that there isn't, as you mentioned, that separation where this person may have their likes, their hobbies, and this other person may have their likes and their hobbies, but we don't come together to enjoy it
Mhm.
when we speak about it? What do you think is causing that?
I think it's fear, uh, fear that fear of these fundamentally fear of being alone, and fear that, oh, if my partner's doing something, and we're not talking about going out and being polyamorous or anything like that, but if my partner's like wants to do some sort of art, they're interested in art and they're spending time, and I'm not interested in art, I'm doing something else, and they say, oh, well, we have to do art classes together or something like that, that's ridiculous. Someone's going to be dissatisfied. But if everybody's has their hobbies, for example, and we're getting really into like minutia examples that I hope people can take the general meaning, but people do what they're doing to express themselves and to feel, and to have them, be better in themselves. And then they come back together and say, well, this is the project I did today. What do you think? Oh, that's really cool, blah, blah, blah. Like, however it is. And then the other partner is like, oh, I'm learning how to do, learning how to work on AI. And the other partner is not interested in, hey, look at this cool thing I found out. And like, you're having something to converse about. Otherwise it's boring. And if you're doing something just for your partner, meaning like, oh, I'm going to start taking art classes because she's taking art classes and we want to do things together. You know, I'm not interested in taking art. Then you're going to be resentful because why don't we do the things I want to do? It's a mess. It's like you can do different things. You're not going to grow apart. The important thing is to communicate what's going on in your lives, your internal worlds, what you're what you're scared of, what you learned about yourself, and be very mindful, not make assumptions, not personalize things. There's just a lot to that, but primarily is deep communication, one with the other, so that everybody can be happy, and recognize that it is not a competition. If I have to go to art class with my partner, oh my goodness, she's doing better at the art than me, and then start getting a competition, that's just a recipe for disaster. I don't know.
No, you're right. And I'm really glad you mentioned the communication because that seems to be at the source of a lot of people's issues. Because I remember I was having this conversation with a woman, and she was telling me that sometimes she'll get into a situation with her partner at the time, and she'll just sit there, Michael, and just stare. He should know what I'm thinking. And I'm like, oh man, so many people fall into that trap where you expect the person to always understand your perspective, even though you haven't communicated that perspective at all. And I found that as we are raised as children, we're taught how to talk. Like, we can pronounce words, we can form sentences. But when it comes to communicating what we want, how we feel, that seems to be a difficulty for a lot of people. And I want to go back to your earlier point when you mentioned childhood experiences. I wonder how many people who struggle with communication as an adult if you look back at their childhood, maybe they weren't allowed to communicate their displeasure with certain things or their dislike of other things like, you know, you mentioned your age, you're a little bit older than me, but I remember going to my friend's house as a kid and their parents would be like, oh, I don't want to eat. Like your child will be like, oh, I don't want to eat this. And the child parents would be like, you better eat it or else. So now you develop that, oh my God, if I speak up, there's going to be quick and in some cases severe consequences. Why do you think so many people struggle with communication, whether it's communicating what they want, communicating how they feel, or just communicating that they need assistance and help in their life?
Fundamentally, I think that when people are communicating their wants and their needs and their internal world, fundamentally their internal world, right? So again, it is a fear of rejection. It is a if I tell my partner this about myself, they're going to reject me. So then you live in this kind of like clouded world where they can't know what you're really interested, what really like turns you on. You know, the area of sexuality is like really where this works. You know, where people could be for 20 years not expressing to their partner the things that turn them on in the bedroom. And it could be something really simple. If you just did this, like, can we try this? Kind of exploring each other together. um, and so they can end up having a dissatisfying sexual relationship because everybody's scared that if they express themselves, that they're going to be rejected and whatnot. And that doesn't mean that your partner has to do something that you're not interested in, but you can work through these things by communicating. Well, it is feels vulnerable, but why would why would you want to be in a relationship where things don't feel vulnerable? That's the sweet spot. That's the opening. That is the juice that makes a relationship worth having, is to be in that. If you're trying to protect yourself and feel that a need to protect yourself um, in your relationship, then it's probably not a good one. I mean, it's probably not the best one, and even though it's hard, and you don't have, that doesn't mean that you just have to say everything at every moment, but make time to, hey, I want to talk. Hey, tonight, can we talk about this thing I'm going through right now, or I'm feeling, I'm scared about this or that, the other thing, whatever it is, take that time so that the other person doesn't have to be a mind reader and wonder why you're acting weird or this or the other, whatever it is. Don't want to get into too many examples because they dilute the message, but making time to express oneself to each other in a way. I mean, it's so hard because oftentimes when people are in relationships for some time, they've kept so much close to the vest that when they try and be vulnerable, there's already these patternings that have happened. And so I think it's a lot harder to do that later in a relationship than if you just start off like setting the ground rules. Hey, we're going to talk about everything. I'm not going to judge you. We're going to work through it to the best of our abilities, and also not be attached. If there's something that is a really irreconcilable difference that we really feel that is a deal breaker, then we have to be able to always leave breakup on the table. You know, not the first recourse, right? It's not like this, but we need to be able to talk about things so that we can both be fully expressed and compromise, communicate our feelings, our desires, our fears, our joys, all these kinds of things, um, without feeling that we're going to be judged. And that has to happen really. The easiest time for that to happen is to make that the pattern from the beginning of the relationship, rather than being in it for 10 years and then going to counseling. And then that's what they're trying to do in counseling anyway. They're trying to like undo these patterns that have developed over long term in these relationships. So I'm complete if I've answered the question.
You have, and I wish you were around about 7 years ago so you can speak to the girl I was dating at that time when it comes to vulnerability, my friend. She hated it. To her, it was like a sign of weakness,
Well,
right?
that's a belief. That's a personal belief of hers, right? So that's one of her core defining beliefs. You can get past that, by the way. I mean, in a relationship, you can get past that. So by talking about how it's by having her experience how it's not a sign of weakness, but it's a sign of power, right? To be able to express yourself vulnerably is a sign of self-confidence, right? I can't express myself vulnerably if I'm scared to, right? It's actually the opposite of what she's thinking, but because of her male role models or whatever, she's got this idea that you can get past that for sure, 100%. But it has to be worked on in the beginning, especially in the case of yours 7 years ago, right?
How would then, if the person is resistant like how she was, how would the partner then assist her, to your point, in turning that around?
Well, again, talk about it. Well, what makes you think that that's a sign of weakness? Let's talk about it. And not by pointing out the logical, it's logically inconsistent, right? I just explained how being vulnerable is a much more, embodied, strengthful position than holding everything in, because you're holding it in because of fear. So rather than just telling her that simple statement, you can ask questions about, well, why do you think it's weak? She'll soon, not just she, but anybody who has these core beliefs are so fragile, they fall apart upon, 5 questions in, the whole house of cards collapses, right? So it's not about telling them where they're wrong, because you're going to get resistance. All of a sudden they feel judged for having this very important belief, whatnot. But you ask them questions, and immediately, if the house of cards will start falling apart, right? How is this a sign of weakness? Because men aren't supposed to do that, or whatever she could say, right? It's, you just keep following down the logical trail to find out that there's nothing there. And that's the only way that you can get somebody to change their beliefs, is for them to come to the conclusion themselves. So telling them how they're looking at the world wrong has never worked in my experience, ever, ever, ever. But being, and it also, I'm thinking out loud here, it's also making you learn more about what is the background of why she has that belief, right? So you get to know her better while she's getting to know herself better. So it's a win-win.
That's a good point, because if you can take the time to understand what is preventing your partner from growing within the relationship, then it's a win-win, to your earlier point, for the relationship and of course for the two people involved, because we all will struggle with something at some point in our life, right? It could be a mental health thing, it could be a physical health, it could be emotional health, it could be whatever it is. And if we're in a relationship, I would hate for anyone to feel that they're alone in a room full of people, right?
Right?
Because if you have to fight this feeling and you're unequipped, that's where your partner is supposed to come in. Like, the person I'm with now, there's things that I would struggle with, and there's things that she struggles with, and they're very different.
Mm-hmm.
But what she struggles with, I'm strong in, and vice versa. So
Mm-hmm.
she pulls from my strength, and
Sure.
I pull from her strength. But then when I look at, and I'll ask you this afterwards, but when I look at some of the people I assist, there's like a wall between both people. I can't pull from my partner.
Mm-hmm.
They can't pull from me. Why do you think that happens, where they want to do better, they can't do it on their own, they're looking for strength, reassurance, support from the person they're in a relationship with, but all they're hitting is a wall?
I mean, without knowing the details, it's hard to answer the question, but in general, it's the same thing. People are not, they're not asking the right questions. They haven't created the space where either or both partners are going to feel that they can respond and not feel judged, right? Like, if I tell you I'm struggling with this, and then your partner says, well, why are you feeling that? That's stupid, right? That, just an example. All of a sudden, well, I can't tell you anything because I'm going to be judged. So boom, walls closed. They can't be supported. Well, I'm struggling with this. Oh, tell me about your struggles. What's going on? And you can just kind of unpack, help them unpack that for themselves and for you to understand their internal world. It's really, it's easily said, harder to be done, but it's not that hard. It's like, it's really not that hard. It's a matter of practicing, wanting to be in that space and watching your own self while you're having those conversations. And for the other person to also be watching their own self while they're having those conversations, see what's coming up. Oh, we're stepping into some territory that's making me feel vulnerable, or I'm feeling scared about telling you this because I'm going to be feel like I'm going to be judged. And you know what's the real problem is a lot of people are just so lack so much self-awareness that they'll say, okay, I won't judge you, and then immediately they just say something to the point. It's like, okay, well, this is an issue. Like, what are you gonna do? You just judged her, or you just judged him. Like, you just told him he's stupid, or whatever the thing is, or why can't you just figure it out, or dismissed, or lack of understanding. People just want to be understood. I mean, it's hard to answer these questions of specifics without knowing the whole thing and putting them into a generality. But it takes time, it takes effort, and it takes the willingness to go there. And and it's much more easy for me to say than it is uh, uh, to say and explain those things, which is almost like platitudes. But it is what people need to do. They need to slow down. They need to pay attention. They need to be kind-hearted. They need to engage with their best self in every interaction with their partner. That being said, it's super easy for me to see if I'm working with somebody, just like boom, 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 and help them and coach them. Stop, hold on, stop right there. Stop right there. Now, did you notice what she said? You just dismissed her. Do you feel it? You see how you just dismissed her? You said X. It's easy to see it from the third party, but when you're in it, when it's just two and you don't know what you're doing and that you're trying to practice for the first time, it's very hard to see how little triggers, like dismissing someone is so easy to do if you're not really, really, really careful. For example, misunderstanding them or making an assumption. They said X, I'm assuming Y, and I'm going now continuing the conversation under the false assumption that they intended Y, or reading beyond what they said and going through a whole spiral of assumptions and then reacting to them based on those assumptions. Well, that's not what she said. Now you've spiraled into all these assumptions and you're responding to her as if she had said Y, but she really said X. So she's not feeling understood. Like it is, I don't want to say like it's harder than it is because it's really simple. Slow the F down. Listen. There's a practice called nonviolent communication. Just using those tools, they feel kind of hokey at first because you're kind of repeating what they said and making sure everybody's on the same page. But after a while, you just start noticing, okay, I really don't understand what you said. I need to ask a couple more questions so I can really, get there, right? And then it just becomes second nature after a while. But that itself is a self-improvement tool because you can use those tools with everybody, with your friends, coworkers. Your boss tells you something, for example. Now you know how to do nonviolent communication. You can then, your boss tells you something and you're not totally clear, and you, rather than going off and doing the thing that your boss didn't ask you to do, then you go back to the boss. Hold on, I need some clarity. Is this how you want it, or is that how you want it? And then you're on the same page, and you move forward on the same page, and everybody's much more easeful. The alternative is to go back to your desk in the office, do what you think your boss said to do something totally wrong, spend your whole day doing that, hand it back, and he or she is like, this isn't what I asked for, right? It's the same thing in a relationship. I told you X, you assumed Y, you started behaving in this way without getting clarity. It's really just, it takes time and it takes effort, but it's all worth it, man. It's all worth it.
Then let me ask you, Michael, as we touched on this earlier, and this is going to loop into what we just discussed, the tough guy image and the myth around that. When that is discussed, what are some of the myths around the tough guy image?
First thing that pops to mind is the example of your girlfriend's 7 years ago, where he can't be. You have to maintain this shield of a tough guy that doesn't have feelings or doesn't have wants or desires, is just a stoic, tower in the storm, right? Meanwhile, that is the most powerless place to be. It's isolating. It is it is isolating and lonely. It is it is lacking in external input so that you can be a better person. If I can't speak about what I'm struggling with, I'm not offered the opportunity to get inputs from friends, families, coworkers, mentors, right? Because I'm the tough guy, right? And the tough guy is usually the weakest guy in the room, right? It's a show, it's a display. I'm a pretty big guy, but I'll tell you how I'm feeling. It might take me a second to say, hold on a second. How are you feeling, Mike? Let me think about it. I'm feeling this. And I could go as long as you want me to go, right? And I'm not scared to say that. But in the case of your girlfriend a few years ago, she is manifesting or sorry, promoting that tough guy image in you. Well, I don't want to hear about your feelings or your whatnot because that's not what a strong man does. Right. How's that working out? How did that work out for her? Right. And how did that work out for you in that relationship? Right. Not so good. The tough guy image is is uh is the flimsiest sort of veneer of toughness. It's got no substance to it. It's got no substance to it because we're more than just our physical presentation of a quiet, stoic being in the world. We are, our full capacity is an emotional being, a physical being, a mental being, and a being that wants to go out and do in the world, right? With our, with our spirit connected to heaven and our feet on the ground to the divine. I mean, connected to that which is greater, to all of creation, whatever you want to call it. I never use the word heaven. I don't know why I did right now, but our our spirit connected to all of creation and our feet on the ground. So when we're in balance, then we're whole. And so the tough guy thing is just a little It's just a little protective device, little egoic device that serves the function of protecting us from the imagined possibility of being hurt.
And I'm going to connect the former friend that I spoke of earlier to that because he, I believe, was experiencing that as well. Because when he began to blame his friends, he would blame and then become aggressive. So there's times where he would kick their car. I remember one instance, and this is no joke, Michael, where something happened and he blamed his friend. I wasn't there, so I heard it from him as well as the couple other friends that were there, and the stories match, so it had to be true, right? No one lied about anything. So something happened, and then he blamed the friend, and then what he did was he backed up from the car a couple of meters, ran, jumped in the air, and kicked the car. Literally a flying kick.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm visualizing this, right? Because he was like maybe like 5'4", so he's a shorter guy. So I'm visualizing this, and because when he told me he was still so upset, I'm trying not to laugh because the image of grown adults thinking that they're Mortal Kombat characters is kind of strange to me, right?
Sure.
So when he described it, he said, "Well, it's his fault that I had to kick the car." And I'm
Yes.
thinking, you didn't have to react that way, but I get it because you want to come across, to your point, as the tough guy. So no one can challenge you verbally, emotionally, in any arena. But I told him, I was like, you know what you're doing? I'm like, you're doing this because there's something underneath the surface that you're
Mm-hmm.
trying to portray because you want to be this Herculean man where maybe inside you're small.
Mm-hmm.
So I share that because I always thought, at least back then, that the tough guy image was only pertaining to men. But you get a good example with my ex from years ago that it could be anybody that can be projecting that kind of image. What do you then
Mm-hmm.
say to the people who maybe had that same thinking that I did years ago, where it's only men that have this, and maybe women cannot project this type of imagery of themselves?
Well, it goes back to that what we were talking about earlier about the divine feminine. So the opposite of the divine feminine where the retraction away from the divine feminine is exactly that guy. He's not intuitive, flexible, expressive, gentle. He's authoritarian, controlling, cold, violent, cruel, hard-hearted, insensitive, right? And doing those things to protect his like little fragile ego. And I don't mean to be pejorative to your ex-friend, but that's that's what he's doing. And and then the other thing is like, of course, telling him that you're doing this to protect your thing. It was like that. That's not gonna land. But slowing it down, talking to him, and getting him to unwind himself to figure out what he's doing is going to definitely be more effective um, in all those cases, rather than because otherwise you got two people, two bulls banging each other. No, you do it because of this. No, I do it this. My friends are the issue. All that stuff, that story, it's just energy. It's energy. Diffuse questions, curiosity, and lack of judgment is the approach. Is my approach to like everything, typically working with people, talking with friends. I rarely meet energy with more energy. Unless it's
Agreed.
unless it's like a death situation, dogs attacking me or someone's coming after me, which doesn't happen, right? Has happened, but very rarely.
Yeah, I know I agree with you because when I did it that way, the friendship was still able to continue. When I did it the way that you do it now, right? Because now I'm more experienced, I'm more trained, so on and so forth. Because similar to you, that's the approach, right? Ask questions, understand, and help them to get there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of
Yeah.
just knocking heads. He turned around and he said that I don't like those questions you're asking me, and that's how the friendship
Oh,
ended. That is how
okay.
that is how the friendship ended.
There you go.
And I right, and I look back, and you're like me, like I was even surprised. I look back and I was like, hmm, all those years of me saying you gotta stop doing this, and then when I came from a place of compassion and trying to understand, it was immediately he got upset. F
Immediately ego
bombs, F
shattering.
this, yeah,
He
F
can't go there.
bombs,
You
F
can
you,
tell
and he
me
couldn't
whatever
go
you
there.
want because when you're telling him, you're confirming like, Train's telling me what to do, because he's trying to control me, all that kind of stuff. Even if it was true and it was in his best interest. As soon as you have him answer the question, that veneer, the tough guy thing that he was trying to hold, is so flimsy and so fragile. He can't even handle one question because the answer is exactly what you've been telling him for all these years. And so defensively, is going to come back that way. Come back the way that he did. It's not uncommon, huh? When you ask people questions, they get very. When you ask people questions that way, not in a leading way, but just whatever it is that you ask them. As soon as that veneer, which is protective, right? It's there to, imagined. He imagines that veneer is there to protect them. As soon as he has to like answer that first question, and you realize that there's nothing there, it's just it's just just an illusion. All that stuff that he's been telling himself, and that illusion is so flimsy that it becomes very threatening. So I'm not surprised at all.
Yeah,
But that's
yeah.
the only way to make change.
You're right. You're right. Because I asked him, I was like, why is this happening? Right. Like I was trying to understand. I was like, okay, what do you want to happen? What do you want different? Like I'm coming from a place of curiosity. I'm getting him to say it. Right. He answered two questions. F bombs. F you. F this. F. And I was just like, here I am about to eat because he called me. Right. And I was like, here I am about to eat my lunch. And I have a grown man swearing at me.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Right. And to your point, right? Like it was probably like, okay, I don't want to confront this because when I confront it, I'm feeling it.
Mm-hmm.
And feeling it is too much for me. So what do? I mask that feeling by attacking you because now attacking you makes me feel strong, makes me feel powerful, makes me feel important. And ultimately, that's how it ended. And it was unfortunate, but I knew to your point that it was coming.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sorry you lost your friend. I hope that, but maybe for the best. But maybe he came to it on his own after a while. You never know. Sometimes people get challenged in that way, and they react in the moment, and then at night we're like, oh, it's an interesting question. May have helped them and not even know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's been 4 months, so we'll see. But um, as we close, Michael, I'm going to give you three wishes, and of these wishes, you can wish for three things that people you want people to know. So, when it comes to limiting beliefs, what are three things you want people to know and be able to understand, and why?
Three things about limiting beliefs. First of all, the limiting beliefs are, or first of all, you have limiting beliefs and they're outside of your awareness. That's number one. You have limiting beliefs and they are outside of your awareness. So it is your duty in terms of becoming for your growth to figure out what these limiting beliefs are. That's one statement. Second of all, these limiting beliefs are there because of earlier experiences in your life. You developed them, they created a model of the world for you to feel safe in the world, and they're operating again outside of awareness. That's number two. Third thing is um, they are not true. Full stop. These beliefs, so these beliefs that came from protective, childhood and adolescent sort of attempts to make sense of the world are not true, and they're operating outside of your awareness. So it's your job to get them into awareness and recognize the flimsy nature of their very existence.